Okay, since we have a quorum, let's go ahead and I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start with is there anything you need to do, Nicole, before we get rocking?
No, you guys are good. We're recording the meeting, so it'll be uploaded as soon as we can within the next couple days to YouTube and Longmont Public Media. Thank you, Steph, for helping out again tonight. There's Ann. So we'll continue to monitor the waiting room, you guys, and let people in. So if you need anything, just holler.
Okay,
it's
terrific.
All yours.
Thank
you.
Okay. The meeting has been called to order, and is there any public to be heard?
No, there is no public to be heard.
Thank you. Then let's go ahead and move on to approving the minutes for both the August 13th, 2020 meeting and the September 3rd, 2020 meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Jake. Second? Anne raises her hand. Anne is seconding.
Second.
Any questions, corrections, anything like that? Yes, Graham?
I had a question about, let's see, what is it? It's the motion that passed at the end of last meeting where we approved adding a question to the agency applications about equity. That part I recall very vividly and seems accurate. The part I'm not clear about, which I would ask the board to verify for me, is the adding equity goal area under the self-sufficiency and resilience priority area. And that struck me as maybe a little bit different than what we were talking about. I thought we were saying adding an equity goal under each of the priority areas and not just the self-sufficiency.
My recollection is that we were going to add the Boulder equity area to self-sufficiency and not one individual. I thought, but that's my recollection.
And do you recall what the intention? I thought it was also under each area. We were going to ask what they were doing to support equity. Is there? So we got a split decision on the board right now. Anybody else have a recollection? Caitlin.
That's right.
Oh, sorry, Caitlin, and then Jake.
So I think there were two different things we talked about, and I think this is what Graham is thinking of, is we talked about adding a separate bucket for equity. We also talked about adding a separate bucket under each of the categories. And I think what we ended up deciding was to add that Boulder question that Eliberto said. There were those two areas where we were not allowing people to specify those in their application. And we wanted to add a question to the application about how they would deliver it equitably, or multiple questions around that staff were going to research the best way to ask them how they were going to do that. But that was separate from the question of the different buckets. And was more about that list of 14 areas. I think we did 14 out of 16, and we said we should add the other two that Boulder also does.
Jake?
Yeah, that's roughly my recollection, Mr. Chair, as well, is that we had the long conversation about adding the bucket. We ultimately came to a split decision that vote failed, and what we decided to do was to add the equity issue to each individual bucket, to use that term, to each individual area, and then to take the Boulder question as well. But I think the intention of the board was to ensure that equity is measured in each one of our different areas, I think was the intention. Good catch, Graham.
Okay. Any other feedback on that? And I noticed you had unmuted and then I spoke over you.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I don't actually remember, so I'm trusting Jake, to be honest.
Okay, so it sounds like the intention is different than what was captured in the minutes. I'm not sure. I would look to some direction on how to best reconcile this. We can amend the minutes and then approve them at the next meeting, or we could have a motion to approve them with amended language. I'd rather not do that because I think it's confusing enough, everything that we just walked through, that probably the specific language is really going to matter. Alberto, do you have a sense of what might work best? Or Karen?
So, so I would say that because when you look at the motion that we think we passed, so maybe we just clarify where there is confusion, or so that we can figure out how to change it, because I think it's probably best to make the changes to the minutes and adopt the approved minutes with amendments is probably the easiest way to do that. The longer we wait, the fuzzier we get. So it seems like that in looking at that particular set of minutes, that it sounds like the first part of that is correct. That that we accept Eliberto's suggestion of adding the equity goal area under self-sufficiency and resiliency priority. So that was the bolder option. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then adding an equity question to the application, which is what we really brought back tonight, which we understood would be that instead of just having an area where we address equity, that we include that in the application, so that we're looking at how they are providing all of their programs and services in an equitable manner. So I think we are aligned with the intent, but maybe we didn't capture it in the minutes in the way that is clear.
Well, I would offer that
maybe it is clear. I don't know.
Perhaps we left, it might be okay that it's not precise, because I think we are going to discuss that tonight, and tonight we can give more specific direction to which, it's included, for instance, in all the priority areas, and it shall be included in this way,
I think what we said is that we wanted someone to be able to apply for, if what their program is doing is about equity, that they can apply for that. And what we said is this, and there's an existing goal in under self-sufficiency and resiliency, which is what the city of Boulder uses. So I think as an example, so if El Comité wanted to, or Intercambio or someone, because that's kind of their purpose, that they would have an area in which to mark and say, this is what our program addresses, is this particular goal area. So I think we said that was already in the application, and that made sense. And then what we wanted to bring back tonight was what kind of equity questions do we want to include in the application, so that we're looking at how agencies are addressing equity in a more broad, kind of across all aspects of their operation. So I think that's really what we're going to bring back and talk about tonight.
Okay. Caitlin?
I would just add, I think, as I'm reading the minutes and hearing what Karen is saying, when we said to add those two things from the Boulder area, I don't think that I realized from the slides that we were looking at that those fell under self-sufficiency, that they were part of that goal area, which may be where the confusion is coming, because it was like 14 goal areas, but they weren't necessarily subdivided into our like big buckets. I don't really have, we can talk about whether we want to change that. I don't think I made the connection that those were going to be subdivided and that this would be under that. So maybe that is where the minutes are actually more precise than what we were talking about versus less precise, which is fine. I think so I'll just add that was where my confusion, hearing that helped identify that that's where I would be confused on it.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay.
Alberto?
So just as a reminder, so the goal areas are what are the drop-down goals that the agencies can choose from on the program level of the application. Then the self-sufficiency is really the back end or back office, for lack of a better word, bucket where we have categorized these goal areas. That's the relationship that exists between the two.
Okay. So the question related to the minutes really comes down to, is the motion as it's reflected here inaccurate as to the intention of what we were voting on? If not, then we can just accept the minutes and we can make any modifications going forward to give precision or additional direction to what we voted on last week. That's my take on it. Is anybody feeling like that is not a good way to move forward? Okay. Jake, I think you're like the parliamentary nerd. So do you have any thoughts on that? And I mean nerd in the kindest way, most respect.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense as a motion, Mr. Chair. If you wanted to move that, that would, I mean, well, I guess you're right. We don't necessarily need a motion if we're all comfortable with that, because if the language in the minutes, if the goal is that we're going to specifically clarify the language in the minutes tonight, then I think we can move forward safely. And I think also through this conversation, just informally, staff has a pretty good understanding of what our intention is and what our goals are. So yeah, I think moving forward would be perfectly in order.
Great. Yeah, I don't have any concerns that we're not going to get to our desired outcome if we accept the minutes as presented.
And Brian, I'm not the Robert's Rules nerd, but you do have a motion on the floor.
Yes.
That would be accepting the minutes, and then we've had discussion about that, and so it sounds like you would want to move forward and see if that motion will pass.
Yep. Let's go ahead and vote on the motion to approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor, please. Okay. Any opposed? Please raise your hand. Okay, great. We can move forward then. Thank you, everybody. So, Karen or Eliberto, who's going to take us through the next steps here?
It is EM. Mr. Mendoza.
Okay.
He doesn't look like he knows that it was EM.
No, I was wondering, can I share my screen, Nicole? I just want them to see the document that I created and then reference back to it so they understand where this fits. All right, so I'm gonna share the packet. Okay, so what you're looking at is the minutes that we just discussed and approved. Then, so I want to start here. So I'm going to kind of set the groundwork, and Karen, you can jump in whenever. And if anyone has questions, I can't see everybody, so just speak up because I can only see 4 people on my little strip right now. So, so basically, I took that. I went back and I listened to the meeting, and I took that mandate to add a question to the Human Services Funding application, and I will say that it is one of the most difficult things to do, because adding one question around racial equity or equity in itself is a very challenging thing to do. And after some back and forth with Karen, I did draft some options, and I sent it to Karen, and then we had a back and forth. The way that we decided to go is we would like to use the GARE racial equity tool that's in your packet. We want to add that to the resource center of the application. And in the instructions, we want to ask agencies as they are answering the questions, because one of the things I noticed is that in reality, a lot of the questions in that racial equity tool are similar to the questions that we ask in the application. There are some similarities. The biggest difference, of course, is that the racial equity tool has a lens of racial equity in it. And so we want to share that with the agencies and ask them to consider that to inform their answers, and ask them to think beyond just racial equity and think about equity in a broader term as they're answering these questions. At the same time, I wanted to honor what the board had asked. And so as Karen and I discussed where the question around equity in the application directly belonged, we came down to adding a question to the number 3, target population. So, and unfortunately when I sent it to, when I look at my Word document, from the word please share, that to me is in red because that is new. That was not in the question before. The question ended and described the specific population served by the program. And so I added the please share strategies the program will implement to ensure target populations are served equitably. It was a challenge to boil down such a huge topic of equity into one question. But I feel comfortable in having the agencies use the racial equity tool to inform their answers on the application as they're writing them, to use that tool to help them understand the value of equity. And I was going to add that to the instructions as well. So that's kind of where we landed, and I'd love to have feedback and discussion from the board.
Thank you, Alberto. Okay, feedback for Alberto on, I think there's 2 elements here. One is using the Government Alliance on Racial and Equity form, including that in the application to assist, as a tool to assist applicants on evaluating the racial equity question or the equity question in general. And then the second part is, what do you think about the language of equity included in the application and where it is included on question 3? Why don't we start? Go ahead, Deanna.
So I was just going to say, I like the language in question 3 that you've added. I think it's nicely broad and open-ended and gives them a lot of opportunity to discuss their goals. And I think my concept of the equity question was very broad as well, and that we weren't limiting it to racial justice issues, and that I was contemplating, are they equitably applied to, the LGBTQ community? Are they providing access to seniors, people with disabilities? So I'm happy to see that the question is open that way. I think that leaves it so that the plans or the programs can really develop that. And I think providing them some guidance with the GARE questionnaire is good, as long as they don't think that the question is only about racial justice issues, which is obviously huge and very important, but not exclusive.
Right, and that's why when I write the instructions, I want to make sure that I make that very clear.
Thank you. Yes, Anne?
I don't know. I'm just not sure if that's big enough for the question, equitable. I don't know if that can be perceived as financial, or, I want it to be more inclusive to other populations like race. I don't know. It just seems it is broad, but I'm not sure if everyone is going to get it. Like if El Comité looked at that, what are they going to think?
Thanks, Ann. We've got Karen and then Caitlin and then Councilmember Christensen. Nicole, could you unmute? Oh, I got it. There you go, Karen.
We need to define what equitable means. I would think we need like a definition. What does it mean? So does it mean, everything, or, so it's like, that's just such a broad word. What does it mean exactly? So that's what I'm asking.
Okay, thank you. Caitlin?
Yeah, I agree with Ann and Karen around that. And one of the things I'm seeing in the GARE questions that might help inform that. So right now we're saying the question is, please describe how it will be delivered equitably. And I wonder if the question in like step 2, number 2, what does it tell you about, what does data tell you about existing inequities, and how are you going to address root causes of that? And I wonder if something that's a little more specific, rather than making sure this is going to be delivered equitably, asking them to talk about how the program may be addressing root causes of inequity and to describe what those inequities are. So that it still leaves it open to talk about race, gender, LGBTQ issues, age, any sort of that, but really diving into like addressing the root causes of it. Because I think that's really what we're getting at, is we want it delivered equitably, but we also want to see that folks are thinking about the root causes of some of those inequities. And I think that's kind of why we were thinking that it fit under so many different things, is that there are inequities in all of our different buckets. So I wonder, I'm just thinking that we could maybe be more specific there to get to what the inequities are that they're addressing.
Thank you, Caitlin. Councilmember Christensen, and then Jake.
Thank you. And thank you, Eliberto, for including this this document of the GARE document. My question is whether, because I think that having people look at this document and talking among themselves will help them focus on issues maybe that they have considered and haven't considered, but at least they'll be able to convey them to us better. I was wondering if they will be filling out this document or just using this as a something to inform themselves. Will they be turning in something like this, or just using that to inform them? Will everybody be getting this this 2-page document?
So, Councilor Christian, it'll be available to every applicant that applies. I didn't. So I think I didn't think we were going to ask them to fill it out and send it back in for a couple of reasons. One is, I mean, that would add extra burden to you all to, if it was going to become a part of reviewing. And then two, it does add extra effort to the agency to have to fill out another document along with all the things that we're asking already. And then I think the third thing is, when you actually look at the questions, there are a lot of similarities. I think our questions in the applications are well thought through. And I think that while the GARE document definitely has some nuances around equity, I think there's still a lot of similarities that look at how well have you researched, how well, for example, there's a piece on engagement. How well have you engaged the clients in implementation or participants in implementation? So I just think that the GARE document is a good tool, but not necessarily a requirement.
Okay, I understand that, because we're already giving them a lot of paperwork. They don't need more paperwork. But rather than have it available to them, I would do where they have to pull it out of us. I would have a push thing where we give it to them so that everybody's got this so they can consider this. I think Karen hit the nail on the head with how do we define equity? And I think this helps people get that and get that they don't have to go to this. We're going to give it to them because we're really serious about it. So my suggestion would be to just send this along as a PDF to everybody so they get that we're not kidding. we mean it. So
Karen, do you have a clarification on Councilmember Christensen's question?
Not necessarily a clarification, but I think just to add, so Polly, we did go back and forth about whether to have this be a required, to have them fill out the form, so it's Ellie Burton. We kind of went back and forth because we think that GARE document is probably the best one that we've seen that really helps. It's a document that we are to be using as City of Longmont employees for programs that we are offering to the community. It's to be a guiding framework for, as we are thinking about all the things that we offer in the city, how do we begin to think about, can everyone have access? Is the way that we're providing the service? Is how we're communicating about the service? Are we doing that in a way that everyone can access the service? Are we leaving anybody out by the way we are delivering the particular program or service? So we did go back and forth about whether we would make this a requirement to complete that, or put that in and reference it, and maybe we can reference it more strongly as far as the document itself, because it will be in the resource center. But we certainly can reference it or even send it out as a PDF if that would be helpful. So we end up landing on it being a framework and to give folks ideas, because we do think that, because we often get general answers to the questions that we've asked in the past. And I think we do want more specific answers. We do want to see evidence that folks really looked at the data, and the data is informing how they are providing their service in an equitable fashion. So we went back and forth all the way around as about the best way to do this. So we didn't rest it. So we are really interested in your feedback and what you think we really should be doing here.
I really don't think that we should require everybody to fill this out. I'm just saying, just send it to them so they have it available, right, so they don't have to hunt around for it.
It's more in their face, yeah.
Yeah, so that they have that, everybody has it available, and they can use that to answer question number 3. And it'll be helpful to them, and it'll be helpful for them to analyze things, because not every agency, some agencies are very, very targeted on the people that they are going to help. So inherently they are not broadly equitable, maybe. I mean, they are not making sure they have got 50 things checked off. They are a targeted, they're taking care of a targeted group. So they don't necessarily deal with transportation. I mean, all the things on this list. So it doesn't make sense for everybody to have to fill out all this paperwork. And in addition, it's more work for you and Alberto and everybody else to fill out something that's not really necessary to be filled out in the first place. Thanks.
Thank you. Jake, thanks for your patience. Go ahead.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. I just want to circle back a little bit to Caitlin's point, because I think it's a great one, and I really appreciate her thoughts on this. This was some of my concern in our conversation last week about the need for a separate bucket and all that, and I won't relitigate that conversation, but my concern was generally that by not doing that, we make the issue a little small, and we make the way our process handles the issue a little bit small. So I think, but Caitlin did a really good job of getting to the point that I was going to make, and I was going to ask somebody if they had wording that could tackle kind of that specific issue, that we aren't necessarily just, at least for me, I'm not just necessarily concerned about equitable delivery of services. I want these agencies to be thinking about how their operation and how the service they provide generally impacts the equity issue. So I think Caitlin really got to the crux of what I was going to mention, and I would hope that she can think about some specific wording changes to bring into the question that she'd be willing to potentially move, and I'd be all over that. So thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Jake. Graham?
I would support that string of thought and suggest the step 4 question be slightly modified and ask, what are your strategies for advancing equity in all its forms? To make it broader, more inclusive. And then it has teeth in virtue of the answers resulting in scores, which result in the distribution of funds. My concern with the question 3 as worded now is it qualifies it with target population, which in and of itself sort of presents this back door. So if we say, well, how are you equitably serving your target population? Well, maybe the whole issue of target population in and of itself is an expression of inequity in that particular case. And so that language worries me a little bit, but maybe I have an overly suspicious mind.
Well,
I mean, what if my target population was white Anglo-Saxon, heterosexual males? So like then, yeah, we're equitably distributing services to those people. Like I'm not going to want to give you points for that, even if you're really doing a good job of equitably delivering content to that target population. So I think just make it super broad. And what are your strategies for improving equity in all its ways and in everything you do? Something just really broad. So
Thanks, Graham. Go ahead, Alberto.
So I like that, Graham. I think the target population, though, the reason that we have that is because we understand that. Remember, this is a pretty broad funding base, right? We're funding all sorts of things. So, for example, Boulder Valley Women Health and who they're funding is not going to be the same that somebody else may be funding. For example, Hope, right? They may it may be a very different population, and so we understand that. And what we want to know is that, given what the program is intended to do, and who is it intended to help, how is the program ensuring that within that population? So, for example, let's say that it is intended to work with immigrants that are learning English. How is that program being equitable, that it's not only Spanish-speaking immigrants, but how are immigrants from Nepal or Germany or, so it really is about ensuring that if the target population is people learning English, how does everyone who is learning English get served in a way that changes their situation?
Thank you, Alberto. Anne? And then Caitlin?
So I think that's good, but are we going to be able to ask agencies questions during this funding round? So, I think we could say to that agency, do you also serve people from other countries other than just Spanish-speaking population? I guess I don't even know how we're going to go forward with the funding stuff. Are we going to do it virtually? Like, how is all that going to work? Maybe I just missed out on it. But if we could ask questions, then it would be better.
Thank you, Anne. Caitlin?
So I wanted to make a suggestion. I don't think I'm ready to make a motion for this, but a suggestion for a way that we could incorporate some of what we're talking about. So for question 2, it currently says program description. Describe the specific activities that the program will provide and the anticipated benefits that will result for the program. I was thinking something along the lines of, please identify what, if any, historical or current inequities are being addressed and how the program addresses the root causes of these inequities. And then to complement that, in the program evaluation, adding a sentence at the end. So this is number 7. Please also include how you will measure or evaluate the impact on the inequities identified in the program description. So that we tie it both into describing the program, but also in how they will evaluate that they are meeting that objective of the program. So I mostly wanted to throw that out there to see if others have thoughts on other ways we might incorporate it, or if that maybe gets a little closer to what we're trying to get folks to answer here.
Anne?
I just know from the past that's going to be complicated for agencies, especially small agencies. I think it's going to be difficult for them, especially agencies that don't have a lot of money.
Which part do you mean?
The second part that you were talking about, how are they going to measure that? Oof, I don't know. Eliberto, do you have an answer to that?
No, not necessarily, but I think to your point, and actually what I was going to add is, so a couple of things. One, this will be the first time that we do this, and so we'll probably have to extend some grace, because folks may be confused, and I may be answering tons of questions from agencies during that time. And then 2, evaluation. I think that it is a good question to add, and so I'll give you an example. I've had some great conversations with Second Wind Fund, that does, and I had a meeting with them and their board chair, and they showed me they're doing a good job of tracking who's using their services, and they had a large Latino population of youth that were contemplating suicide, right? I think it was a large percentage. And so when I asked them, I said, so when you see this, what are you thinking about as far as how you deliver services, as where do you recruit therapists? What does it mean for your thoughts on how do you support these children, these youth beyond the sessions? And so I think that made them think. I'm not sure if they're measuring it well, but we didn't go into that deep of. But I hope that what these will do is make agencies think. I think there will be confusion any way you look at it. This is a new topic for a lot of folks. Not that they haven't been working on equity issues for a long time, but to put it into words is going to be new for many of the agencies. So I think we'll have to have some grace, and at the same time, I don't know who said it, but yeah, we do mean business about this, and we want you to think about it, even if we do extend grace.
Thank you for that, Alberto. And I share your recognition that this is a new track, and we're going to learn a lot. We're probably going to learn 60% of what we wish we would have known in the first year, and then have incremental improvements over the rest of the time. So we know that perfection is not what we're going to get, no matter how much we want it. I do just want to say I share Graham's thought on the idea, the semantics of target population. And so I wonder if in question 3, target population, where we say describe the specific population served by the program, if maybe that's not a place to say, somehow tease out the question of how do you evaluate your target through the lens of equity? So for instance, if Graham's program came back with, I'm targeting a 56-year-old white Anglo-Saxon male that lives on Carolina Street in Longmont, which if there's a big check, we can talk about, might apply. But that would not, he'd have a hard time answering through the lens of equity how he defined his population. So that's just, I don't have a solution to the thought, but Councilmember Christensen?
I do think it's important. I think maybe the term target population is kind of weird. It implies that, I mean, I see what Graham is saying here. It sort of implies that, I think it's an odd term to be using. But but it is true that maybe we could use a different term. We fund, as Eliberto said, we fund such a variety of groups, and they do have a population that they're going to serve that is not necessarily, well, these are agencies. They are not businesses. They don't go out and drum up services. They don't go out and drum up business because, you know, people come to them because they need help. They don't go out and try to find people who need help. And different groups, different cultures, different groups have very different ways of asking for help. Most people don't ask for help. We know this from surveys that have been done. About 1 out of 8 people, we did a survey with Housing and Human Services a few years ago or Karen did a survey, I'm not sure whether it was through this. 1 out of 8 people who are eligible for services applies. The rest don't apply because most Americans of all groups have been taught that it's weak to ask for help, that it's shameful to ask for help, it's shameful to need help. So in many ways, you're not getting an overview of the culture of America anyway. You're getting people who really are, I think, quite desperate for help, or they wouldn't be asking for help in the first place. And so to try to put a layer of expecting it to be equally distributed is a little odd, if you see what I mean, in that I come from a long line of farmers. We never ask for help, no matter how far down we get. There are a lot of cultures where, for instance, a lot of very traditional cultures would never ask for help with their elderly because they would feel ashamed that they couldn't take care of their parents. And yet there are elderly people who need care, and their kids can't take care of them the way they need to be taken care of, and yet they won't ask for help. So I do think it's important for us to keep in mind that these are agencies that are not businesses. They're not going out and drumming up business. So to expect them to have an absolutely equal distribution of different races, different cultures, different genders, different religions is a lot. But we want them to try. We want them to really think about this and be sure that they are that they're not discriminating against anybody, and that they are actually trying to find people who need help. And it is difficult to figure out how to do this and be fair to them, and be, given that not everybody asks for help, even though they desperately need it.
Sorry. Thank you, Polly. Ann, and then Caitlin. Karen, did you raise your hand? Okay. And then
I think we just need to move on this, because I think we can get bogged down a lot on this. And I think I really trust Aliberto to come up with a question that will make sense. And I think his question is good, but just a little bit more teeth in it. If you can just do something with a little bit more, Aliberto, but I trust that you can do that. And then I think we should just move on.
Okay, thank you. And Caitlin?
I definitely hear the need to move on. I want to, I think something that Councilwoman Christensen said there at the end is that these organizations, they're not businesses, they're not going out and recruiting, but these types of questions point to things that are structural inequities in terms of how services are delivered. So if, for example, I just think about the large Spanish-speaking population in Longmont. And if an organization is targeting, for example, low income or children, but they are way out of whack comparatively to Longmont's population in terms of Spanish speakers that are served by it, that points to a potential issue in how they are delivering that program. If they're not providing Spanish translation services, they're not providing, and I don't necessarily expect that every organization is going to do everything, but if we have a whole bunch of agencies that are primarily serving, the white Anglo-Saxon, population, because they don't have the structural pieces to support a large percentage of our population, then that's a problem. And so I think the idea of these questions is really to get folks thinking about, is your target population, or are the demographics of who you're serving really the full demographics of who could be served based on what you say your program goals are? If you say your program goals are to serve, low income children, but then the only low income children you're hitting is, such a small percentage, and it's very racially or ethnically or language, skewed compared to the population, there might be something that needs to be improved in terms of that program delivery to make sure it's getting to the folks who need it. Even, there's cultural things, there may be ways that they're thinking about it. So I think that it's really important to ask the questions to get folks thinking about it. This is the first year. No one's going to get it perfect. I don't think anyone is expecting perfection. I think it's really just to start these conversations and to get folks thinking about how both the agencies and we and the city can be thinking about these deeper questions of how we make sure that the right folks are getting access to services.
Thank you, Caitlin. Karen?
So in the spirit of Anne's urging, it seems like what I have heard is that generally there has been a suggestion to modify questions 2, 4, and 7. So Caitlin had some specific language for questions 2 and 7. I think Graham threw out some general suggestion for item number 4, question number 4. And that we not try to just have, and that we actually keep the target population question as it was, and not put share the strategies for equitably serving the target population. So it sounded like we want to have more equity questions or equity follow-up in questions 2, 4, and 7, and that we also take a stab at defining what we mean by equity in that overview, and that we have the GARE framework document available for agencies to really reference and get some more ideas about the framework. So that's kind of what I heard advisory board members really, talk about.
Okay, thank you. One comment and then a question. The only thing that occurred to me is on question 3, I think what's challenging with target population is it is a relatively accurate term because we think of it in terms of needs. Agencies target populations of specific needs. And so typically we don't think about it in terms of race, ethnicity, gender. So I was almost wondering if really that second part of that question wouldn't be something more like, please share strategies the program will implement to ensure target populations are served regardless of race, ethnicity, and gender, or something like that, right? Really just calling it out. Okay, that is not a point for discussion. I just wanted to throw that out there. Is in terms of what you, Karen and Eliberto, are wanting from us in this meeting, is the guidance, Karen, that you're hearing adequate? Do you need a decision, or what do you need?
So I'll go first and I'll let Karen. So what I would need, I mean, I actually agree with Karen. I think the suggested verbiage that was suggested by Graham and Caitlin is helpful. I would just need that verbiage so that I could put it into the application. I think those questions, with the understanding that folks are not going to get it perfect, I'm fine adding those questions to, or adding those additions to those questions. I just need the verbiage.
And I would imagine, so either we could have, I think we've captured it in the recording, so Nicole can weigh in on whether, so I think we're recording this, we have that. We could certainly ask Caitlin to, and Graham to, and probably has written down her comments. I don't know whether Graham has or not, but we certainly have that in the, in the recordings, that we can just take that information and make the revisions to those 3 questions, based on the input that you provided. And because I think it does get to, because we talked about the importance of, having whatever those strategies be more data informed, and then, and program evaluation is something that we're paying more attention to, and how are they continuing to look at program evaluation as it relates to equity. So I think we've captured it in the notes. I'm going to say Nicole has captured that. I'm sure she has. And if you are all good with us taking that and moving forward, then I think we just want to make sure that we are asking what will be helpful for the advisory board to really evaluate and get a better idea of how agencies that we are funding are providing service with an equity lens. They're planning for it. They know something about it. They're looking at it. They're paying attention to it. So we want to do what you think will be helpful.
Okay, thank you. So from my perspective, this has really been a helpful discussion, because this is our first foray into including this kind of topic. So I think it's important that we really kind of think through how that happens. I also know we don't want to micromanage staff, and it is going to be an imperfect process, and there does have to be a lot of grace given to everybody to really move this thing forward and make sure it has an impact. So sounds like we're at a good place. Jake, are you just stretching, or do you, you're good? Okay, all right. Okay, any other discussion? I think we can move on if it's good with staff. Okay, let's go ahead and move on then. Thank you.
So I think moving on is going to the other business, question 5. So unless there's any, so unless there's anything else, Anne asked about, so how the heck are we going to do it? Approach it this year? We really haven't talked about that. I imagine that we are doing, we're probably doing some kind of Zoom meetings. I mean, we don't know. But so we're just trying to get the application completed and out the door, and then certainly I think we can come back for our, what are we? Is this September? So for our October meeting, and kind of pound out what that hearing health orders are at that point in time.
So can I share my screen, Chair, so I can share the, and it's not updated, but I want to remind folks of the original time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I do that?
Please.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share. So this, I was supposed to and I haven't updated. So as you can see, we're not too far off of time. We wanted to get this out by this Friday, and that has not happened. So we might have to push this date a little back. And really, this we had already decided this was going to be pushed back. We weren't going to be too concerned about this 115 date. To give us more time for this process right here. Right, we were gonna give ourselves more time, maybe even into December, to do this. So I think it will probably be a Zoom meeting. I think that Zoom allows us to have waiting rooms, which is helpful, and we can bring people in. It'll be more work for Nicole as she brings people in and out due to the timing. But I think that is what we can do. But I just want to show that we are not necessarily too off on the original time frame that we set. So I can probably get everything done by midweek next week and maybe send it out or have it. I'm going to be out next week, Thursday and Friday, but I could probably have it set in the system to be sent out on Friday. And we just push things back a week.
So how will that work with people who are, if we approve the recommendations on January, I will no longer be here and new people may be coming on. Does that matter?
Well, we don't approve the recommendation. That's council who approves recommendations.
Okay, that's
So
good.
we will have our deliberation meeting in December. We can still try to aim for that. But yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I would ask that I think the schedule looks good. Let's try to, I know we're going to lose a few days here and there, and where we can, we'll try to compress that to stick to the schedule as much as possible on all the remaining blocks. I'm certain we're not going to be meeting in December in person. So Nicole will have incredible Zoom skills after this year. Yeah, you're definitely push for that raise, Nicole.
For the holiday bonus.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, are really critical because the big piece of this then is to make sure that our evaluations align with these questions. So making sure that we're good with how these questions are asked becomes really important. But this is great. So there's no need to talk about the evaluation portion of this. Is that correct?
So I think that will be something, Eliberto, we've already worked at aligning the evaluation. I think we have talked about that earlier with the advisory board. So we wanted to make it easier to evaluate so that the evaluation tool that you use follows along with the, with the actual application. So that makes it easier for you to rate it. Given we've made a few modifications in the application, we'll have to go back and look at modifying the evaluation tool. But I think we did bring that back to y'all earlier, and I think we were good with those changes. So I would say that probably what we'll be asking Nicole to do in the fairly near future is to start working on calendars and getting the hearing schedule set up so that you can get that on your calendars and we can be ready to to rock and roll and lock in those dates, because we realize that we are doing this during November and December, which is usually a pretty busy time for folks. So.
Yeah. Not this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get your flu shots.
Yeah. Thank you for the reminder, Anne. Okay, so is there, Shakita, one board member we haven't had a chance to hear from. Any thoughts or questions before we start closing it up?
No, I think I agree with Caitlin and Graham, and I totally believe that Eliberto will arrange it to how we want it to be said. He knows where we're coming from. He knows what outcome we are looking for. So I believe he can do it. I have faith in you, Eliberto.
Thanks, Shakita. And
No
Eliberto.
pressure. No pressure.
I will try. I will try my hardest to get it right.
Listen, if you don't get it exactly like we want, it's no big deal. We will just be silently disappointed.
He will get it done.
His end of year bonus will go to Nicole.
It's going to be bad office dynamics. Don't eat any banana bread from Nicole. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So any other business? No. Okay. With no other business, I'm revisiting my agenda here. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Okay. With that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, I just wanted to thank you all for making time for this meeting. I know you're all busy, but it's so valuable, and I love hearing your feedback. So thank you very much for attending and being part of it. All right. Everybody have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Karen? Oh, she left.